The words hung in the air, slurred through a drunken giggle. "You're not the man I dream of." The words were like a punch to the gut. I swallowed the retort that sprang to my lips and instead just stayed silent, a quiet resolve hardening inside me. What happened next was like a slow-motion train wreck, and I'm still trying to pick up the pieces. I met Olivia back in college. She was a force of nature. 28, effortlessly cool. She had this light about her, a natural charisma that drew everyone in. I was captivated from the start. Always laughing, always surrounded by people, always dragging everyone into some spontaneous adventure. I was the opposite. Head down, focused on the books, the grades, the future. I was building a solid foundation, or so I thought. We were different, oil and water, but somehow it worked, or at least I thought it did. We started dating junior year, and I fell hard. She made me feel alive, like I'd been sleepwalking through life until she shook me awake. She had this crazy energy that made me feel like I was missing out on the real world. After graduation, we moved in together. That was it, I figured. The one. The woman I'd spend my life with. We got married a couple of years later. I had my career on track, bought a nice little place. I was working hard, trying to build a comfortable, stable life for us. Olivia, though, she was still searching. She bounced from job to job, dabbled in different hobbies. Nothing seemed to stick. It didn't really bother me. I was making enough to support us both, and if she needed time to find her passion, her purpose, I was okay with that. I wanted her to be happy. It was my hope and dream. But somewhere along the line, things started to change. At first, it was subtle. She started coming home later and later. A late meeting at work. Drinks with friends. She just lost track of time. I didn't think much of it. She was social, always had a ton of friends. I wasn't going to be that insecure boyfriend who freaked out every time his girlfriend stayed out late. But then it became more frequent and the excuses started to sound rehearsed. I'd ask her how her night was, and I'd get some generic, vague answer before she quickly changed the subject. Then there were the other things. The way she barely touched me anymore. How she stopped reaching for my hand when we walked down the street. We used to cuddle up on the couch, her leaning into me. Now she'd sit on the other end, glued to her phone, barely even acknowledging my existence. I kept telling myself it was just a phase. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe she was feeling lost and didn't know how to talk about it. I tried to make things easier, brought home her favorite takeout, planned surprise date nights, even gave her space when she seemed to need it. But instead of bringing her closer, it just seemed to push her further away. One night I made dinner. Nothing fancy, just something I knew she loved. I texted her, asking when she'd be home. "Be there soon," she replied. That was at 7 p.m. By 10 p.m. I was sitting at the table alone, staring at her untouched plate. She finally walked in around midnight, didn't even look surprised that I was still awake. "Oh, hey," she said, like it was nothing. A quick peck on the cheek, barely making contact, and then straight to the bedroom. No questions about why I was still up, no concern about why I looked upset, no acknowledgement that she had completely blown me off. That was the night it hit me, the night I realized something was terribly wrong. I didn't confront her. Not right away. I just started to observe. Paid close attention. The way she smiled at her phone more than she smiled at me. How she suddenly had plans all the time but never invited me to come along. The way she was always texting someone, and if I even glanced over, she'd subtly turn her screen away. I wasn't blind. I wasn't stupid. Something was going on. So, instead of starting a fight, I decided to test the waters. I stopped initiating. I stopped texting her first. I stopped asking about her day just to see if she'd ever offer anything on her own. She didn't react. It was as though I was invisible, or maybe she saw me perfectly well and just didn't care enough to acknowledge me. That was the moment a cold wave of uncertainty washed over me and I started to question everything about myself. Where had I failed? I mentally rewound our shared experiences, desperately searching for the missed cues, the subtle signs I'd overlooked. Maybe I'd been deluding myself from the start, projecting my desires onto her rather than seeing the reality before me. Her offhand remarks echoed in my mind now, those casual comments I'd brushed aside with a smile. "You're such a planner, Jake." Each word now carried a significance I hadn't registered before. "You always play it safe." Was there a hint of disappointment in her voice when she'd said, "Don't you ever just want to do something crazy?" I used to chuckle at those statements, but now they resonated as warnings I could no longer ignore. I had been so focused on providing her with stability, making her feel secure, offering her a meticulously planned future. I was convinced these were acts of love, but the more I gave, the less she seemed to appreciate it. I couldn't grasp the reason. What was I doing wrong? What essential element was missing? Why wasn't I enough for her? I realized I had to take action. If there was even a slim possibility of salvaging our relationship, I couldn't afford to remain passive. It took me some time to process, but I finally came to the conclusion that I needed to actively intervene instead of idly waiting for a miraculous resolution. I carefully planned a weekend getaway, just the two of us, a secluded cabin nestled in the mountains, free from distractions, work pressures, and friends, just us. My thought was that if I could extract her from the daily grind, from the constant pull of her phone and whatever else consumed her attention, we could reconnect and start fresh. She agreed to the trip, but I could sense her lack of enthusiasm. There was no excited, "Oh, that sounds amazing," or a heartfelt, "That's so sweet of you," only a listless nod, as if I'd informed her I was taking the car for routine maintenance. That night, I packed our bags. Hers appeared almost bare, devoid of any personal touches, as if she were preparing for a forced confinement rather than a romantic escape. I chose to ignore the sinking feeling in my gut. The following morning, we embarked on the drive. The journey spanned about 4 hours, and she spent at least 3 of those hours fixated on her phone. I attempted to initiate conversation, inquiring about her work, her friends, even that silly reality show she had been obsessed with a few months prior. Yeah, she'd respond each time. That was the extent of it. No follow-up questions, no reciprocation, just the constant hum of her scrolling. I tried to convince myself that she was simply tired, that I was being overly sensitive and reading too much into her actions. The cabin itself was appealing, isolated, enveloped by a serene landscape of trees and tranquility. I had envisioned us relaxing, engaging in meaningful conversations, perhaps even mending whatever was broken between us. Instead, she walked in, gave the space a cursory glance, and immediately asked, "Do we have cell service out here?" Not, "Wow, this is nice," or "This is a great idea, Jake," just, "Do we have service?" In retrospect, I should have turned the car around and driven straight back home. Instead, I forced a smile and replied, "Yeah, but it's spotty." Probably a good thing, right? She offered no response. We spent the day hiking, or at least I did. She lagged behind, preoccupied, barely taking in the scenic views. I reached out to hold her hand, but she kept adjusting her backpack strap, avoiding the gesture. Eventually, we reached a breathtaking overlook, one of those places where the world unfolded before you like a masterpiece. I turned to share the moment with her, to express the awe I felt. She was on her phone. That was the definitive moment. That was when I knew this wasn't a temporary phase. Her detachment wasn't due to work pressures, stress, or a need for personal space. She had mentally checked out of the relationship, and I was the fool still clinging to the hope of making it work. That evening, we sat by the fire. I prepared dinner, a simple meal of grilled chicken and potatoes. She barely touched her food, merely picking at it while staring intensely into the flames, as if seeking answers to life's profound questions within them. I sat there eating in silence, stealing glances at her while she practically ignored hers. The distance between us felt palpable, heavy with unspoken words and unresolved issues. I desperately wanted to ask her what was wrong, to finally uncover the truth that lay beneath the surface, but something in her posture, in the way she deliberately avoided my gaze, warned me that I wouldn't like the answer. I kept the night flowing, pouring her another drink. She took it, no hesitation. Another glass followed, and she was swaying slightly. It was that raw, unfiltered drunk, everything she'd been holding back just spilling out. Suddenly, she let out this sharp, almost mocking laugh. Not her usual warm, playful sound. This was bitter. "You know what's funny?" she slurred, tilting her head. "I've never been attracted to you. I was just pretending." She laughed again. I frowned, put down my glass. "What does that even mean?" She smirked, swirling her drink. "You try so damn hard, Jake. Always have." There was a pitying shake of her head, like she actually felt sorry for me. Like it's going to change anything. My chest tightened. "What are you talking about, Olivia?" She leaned in, chin on her hand, gaze hazy but fixed on me. "You think being a good guy is enough? That being stable, dependable, nice, makes you someone I should want?" Another soft, dismissive laugh. "But that's never what I wanted." A coldness began to creep into my stomach. "Olivia," I started, but she waved me off. "You know, I used to tell myself I'd learn to love it. That I'd wake up one day and be happy with the quiet life, a guy who takes care of me, plans our future, never lets me worry." She sighed, rubbing her temple. "But God, Jake, do you know how fucking boring that sounds?" I didn't say anything. Just stared. My heart felt like ice. It was like looking at a stranger. This woman wasn't the person I thought I knew, the person I'd spent years loving. She was someone who'd been waiting for this moment to tear me down. And she wasn't even sorry. Just kept talking, casually tossing away everything we'd built, like it was some phase she'd outgrown. I wanted to feel something, anger, sadness, anything, but I just felt numb. She was lost in her own head. I need excitement. Someone who keeps me on my toes. Someone who doesn't follow the rules, who doesn't ask me how my day was like it actually matters. She shook her head again. I need someone different. I just sat there staring. Felt like I'd been kicked in the chest. Different, I repeated, my voice hollow. She nodded, completely oblivious to the damage. Someone with a little edge. Someone a little reckless who doesn't always do the right thing. She blinked, almost like she was seeing me for the first time for what I really was. You're too safe. There it was. All those years, breaking my back trying to be the best boyfriend, the guy who provided, who supported, who made sure she never had to struggle, and it meant nothing. Never would. I swallowed hard, jaw clenching. And you're just telling me this now? I leaned back in my chair, not saying anything. She stared at me, waiting for what? An argument? A meltdown? Maybe some desperate plea for her to stay? I wasn't giving her that. I wasn't giving her anything. I nodded once. All right. I exhaled slowly, barely looking at her. What else is there to say? My voice was flat, detached. You've made yourself perfectly clear. I'm not what you want. So, okay. She blinked again, like she hadn't expected me to take it so easily, like she wanted a reaction. Right then, I couldn't even tell if she was really drunk or just putting on an act. I leaned back, fixing her with a steady gaze. I knew that kind of calm always threw her off. I'm not playing that game, Olivia, I said, keeping my voice even. I'm not going to twist myself into some pretzel shape to fit whatever picture you have in your head. I tilted my head a fraction, a small gesture. And I sure as hell am not going to apologize for treating you well. She opened her mouth, probably ready to launch into another explanation, but she stopped herself. Uncertainty flickered across her face. I pushed back from the table, stood up slowly, deliberately. I'm going to bed, I stated, not really asking. She didn't try to stop me. Looking back, the signs had been there. She'd been dodging my calls in the evenings. Some guy's name kept popping up in conversation, casually mentioned, but too often. Suddenly, she was always busy, always had plans I wasn't a part of. I could have played the detective, snooped through her phone, asked our friends what was going on, but sitting there in the dim light of the living room, I realized I simply didn't care enough. It was weird, almost unsettling. I felt no urge to chase after answers, no desire to fight to win her back. Nothing. Just a hollow feeling. And by morning, the decision was made, although she didn't know it yet. The next morning, she acted like the night before hadn't happened. She woke up, stretched, yawned, the usual routine, as if she hadn't just dropped a bomb on our relationship. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching her move around the cabin, waiting to see if she would say anything. She didn't. Finally, I broke the silence. Do you remember what you said last night? A beat of silence, then. I was drunk, Jake. I don't remember much. I saw it in her eyes, a flicker of guilt, a hesitation. She remembered every single word. She just didn't have the guts to own up to it. I could have pushed her. I could have said, don't lie to me. I could have told her I wasn't stupid, that I had known something was off for months, but I didn't. Instead, I just nodded, letting her believe I bought her act. That's when I made the choice. I wasn't going to fight for her anymore. I wasn't going to beg her to love me. If she wanted something else, let her have it. Let her see what life was like without me carrying the entire damn relationship on my back. So, I started pulling back. The little things at first, no more good morning texts. No more asking about her day. No more planning dates, no more spontaneously picking up her favorite snacks from the store on the way home. I didn't get angry. I didn't turn cold. I just stopped. At first, I don't think she even noticed, or maybe she did and was relieved. But then, slowly, I started to see a change in her. She began reaching out in subtle ways, touching my arm when she talked, sitting closer to me on the couch instead of clear across the room. She laughed a little too loudly at my jokes, even the really stupid ones that usually got nothing. It wasn't because she missed me, not yet anyway. She was doing it because she felt me slipping away. I wasn't the one holding on anymore. A week later, we got back home, and I could tell she was on edge. She'd glance at me when she thought I wasn't looking, bite her lip like she was trying to find the right words to say something, anything. Then one night, I caught her staring. We were both supposedly on our phones, but she wasn't scrolling. She was just watching me. You've been different, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. I glanced up at her, trying to keep my expression neutral. Yeah, she said, a hesitant note in her voice. Is everything okay? I just shrugged, offering a clipped, I'm fine. It was a brush-off, and I knew she didn't buy it. I saw the subtle tightening of her fingers where they gripped the edge of the blanket. There was a time when that would have been my cue. The cue to ask what was bothering her, to pull her close, whisper reassurances, basically beg her to confide in me. But I didn't. In that moment, I realized the dynamic had shifted, the power balance had tipped. A few days later, I started noticing the subtle changes in her behavior. She started putting more effort into her appearance even when we had no plans, no reason to go anywhere. She'd suddenly be curious about my whereabouts, asking where I was going, who I was seeing. One evening, when I mentioned grabbing dinner with Ethan, her ears perked up. "Oh, where are you thinking of going?" I played it cool, a casual shrug. "Haven't decided yet." Then, hesitantly, "I could come with you." That was new. For the past 6 months, she'd been avoiding any kind of shared plans with the dedication of a seasoned professional. I just smiled, a knowing kind of smile. "Nah, it's just a guy's night." She forced a laugh, but I caught the clench of her jaw, the flash of annoyance in her eyes. She was starting to unravel. Then came the night I left my phone in the living room. Woke up the next morning to find it out of place. Honestly, I wasn't even angry. I found it almost comical. She was digging, desperately searching for something, anything to validate her suspicion that I'd emotionally checked out. She needed that confirmation, a reason to tell herself she still held some kind of control. But she wasn't finding anything, and the whole charade was on the verge of imploding. And predictably, it did. Turns out she'd been seeing someone else for months. Not just a one-time thing, a drunken mistake. No, this was a full-blown relationship conducted entirely behind my back. The kicker? When it all came out, she went for the old classic, "I never really found you attractive anyway. You're just boring." After 8 years? Really? I almost laughed at the sheer desperation of that line. It was a clumsy attempt to justify her actions, but she'd become so careless, so sloppy in her attempts to hide everything. It was almost embarrassing to watch. Truth be told, it didn't even sting. I was just done. She must have thought she still had me hooked, still believed I was blindly in love with her because she stopped bothering to cover her tracks. Maybe she was too focused on me pulling away, maybe she just got complacent. But one night, she left her laptop open on the kitchen counter, and there it was, her messages. I don't know why I looked. Maybe a part of me already knew what I'd find. There were texts from him stretching back weeks, months. I scrolled through them, feeling nothing, just reading the words like I was scanning through some email I didn't care about. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. Does he suspect anything?" I took a deep breath, closed the laptop, and went to bed. I didn't wake her up. I didn't confront her. I didn't do anything because I'd already made my decision. The next morning, I got up like it was any other day. Took a shower, made coffee, acted like I wasn't about to completely erase her from my life. Then I called my lawyer. By the time she even dragged herself out of bed, I'd already set the wheels in motion. She had absolutely no idea. And I wasn't going to warn her. I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to wake up one day and realize she'd lost me long before she even understood she needed to fight for me. She wanted more, she would get it in the shape of a cold reality. I knew it was coming, felt it in my bones. It didn't take long for the confirmation to arrive. A few days after I'd set things in motion with my lawyer, Ethan called. Now, Ethan is a solid guy, avoids drama like the plague. He keeps to himself, doesn't get involved, so when he called me out of the blue, sounding hesitant, I knew something was up. "Jake," he started, his voice laced with caution, like he was weighing whether to speak at all. "I don't really know how to say this, but I saw Olivia last night. She was with some guy downtown at the junction and, it looked pretty serious, man." I closed my eyes and slowly exhaled. "Where at?" I asked. "The junction," he repeated, "near the back, in the booths." Strangely, I felt almost numb. No anger flared, no shock registered, no sickening pain ripped through me. I think I had already braced myself. The vague texts, the unexplained late nights, the way she'd started treating me like an afterthought, it all added up. Ethan was just confirming what my gut had been whispering for months. "Jake, you all right?" Ethan asked, concerned. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Yeah, I'm okay. Do you need me to do anything?" "Nah," he said. "I just thought you should know, man." "I got it," I responded. And I did. I knew what I had to do. That evening, I concocted some excuse about having to work late and told Olivia I wouldn't be home for dinner. She barely reacted, just mumbled an okay before turning her attention back to her phone. Around 9 p.m., I parked my car a couple of blocks away from the junction and settled in to wait. I wasn't sure how long I'd be sitting there, but I had a strong feeling she wouldn't keep me waiting too long. Sure enough, at 9:30, she strolled out of our apartment building. She wasn't dressed for a night out with the girls. No heels, no fancy dress, just jeans, a cropped sweater, and that damn bag she only ever used when she knew she wouldn't be coming home right away. I followed her, needing proof, not so close that I'd be noticed, but close enough to keep her in sight. She walked quickly, like she had somewhere important to be. I already knew her destination, but I needed to witness it for myself. When she disappeared inside the junction, I hung back, waited a few minutes before following. I kept to the shadows, standing near the entrance, just watching. And there he was. The guy was the antithesis of me. Where I was clean-cut, he was rough around the edges. Tattoos adorned his arms, and he wore a cocky smirk, the kind of guy who looked like he'd never had to work a day in his life. And the way she looked at him, damn, she'd never looked at me like that. She slid into the booth and leaned in close immediately, like she'd been anticipating this all day. He casually draped his arm around her, and she melted into him. I stood there for a moment, just absorbing the scene, letting the reality sink in. Then I pulled out my phone, snapped a picture, and walked out. No confrontation, just cold, hard evidence. By the time I got back to my car, I had already sent the picture to my lawyer. The message was short: start the paperwork. The next few days passed in a cold silence between Olivia and me. At first, I wasn't even sure if she noticed. She seemed so engrossed in whatever fantasy world she was living in that she didn't seem to register how distant I had become. I deliberately pulled back, stopped checking in with her, and started coming home late without any explanation. She began to push for answers, but I only offered her silence. The real turning point came when I quietly transferred most of our joint funds into a separate account. Nothing illegal, just protecting my assets. That's when her whole demeanor shifted. Suddenly, she was all sweetness and light, like a switch had been flipped. The fake "I love you" started flowing like confetti. She started suggesting date nights, talking about planning a vacation, even brought up the idea of a romantic getaway. It was almost comical watching her scramble, the transparent attempts to regain control. I refused every single request, every suggestion. Then came the morning she logged into our shared bank account. Seeing the balance, or rather, the lack thereof, that was satisfying. Her eyes went wide, a flicker of something akin to panic crossing her face, a priceless moment. She tried to act nonchalant, to play it cool, but I noticed the tremor in her hands as she frantically scrolled through her phone. I knew her habits, her little routines, perhaps better than she thought. The weekly spa appointments, the so-called emergency shopping trips, those long lunches with her new friend. I knew that gravy train was about to derail. She kept glancing at me, these little, nervous darts of her eyes, probably waiting for me to say something, to explode. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I just sipped my coffee, unfolded the newspaper, and scanned the headlines like it was any other Tuesday. A week later, the divorce papers were finalized and ready. I walked back into the house that felt less and less like a home. I found her slumped on the couch, curled up in her usual spot, obsessively staring at her phone screen as though it held the answers to her failing universe. Maybe she was waiting for a text, an apology. Maybe she was clinging to the hope that this was all a nightmare. She didn't even register my presence. I just stood there for a second, watching. She looked smaller, somehow diminished. Like the weight of her actions, her choices, had finally started to crush her. Like she knew what was coming. I pulled the envelope from my inside pocket and dropped it on the coffee table. The sharp slap of paper against the wood made her jump. She slowly lowered her phone and reached for it, her fingers trembling slightly. The moment she flipped it over, the words "divorce petition" clearly visible, her entire body stiffened. She swallowed hard, finally looking up at me with those wide, pleading eyes. "Jake," her voice was barely a whisper, cracking with emotion, this isn't necessary." A dry, humorless laugh escaped me. "Oh, really? And why's that, Olivia?" She shook her head, scrambling for something to say, grasping at straws, anything to make me reconsider, to stop what was coming. "We can work this out," she finally choked out, forcing a pathetic smile. "We don't need to do anything drastic." "Drastic?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow, the question dripping with sarcasm, like spending years with someone you clearly never truly cared for, someone who simply wasn't good enough. The words hit her hard. She visibly flinched. "I never said that," she whispered, barely audible. I crossed my arms, tilting my head slightly. "You did, actually. You just conveniently forgot, or at least, you pretended to." She shook her head, more insistently this time. "Jake, I was drunk. You know that." "Yeah, but drunk words, Olivia, they always come from a place of truth." Her eyes darted away again, fixating on the papers like they were some kind of venomous snake. I sighed, taking a step closer to the couch. "Tell me, Olivia," I said, my voice quiet but firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "How long have you known?" She looked up at me, confusion clouding her expression. "What?" "That I wasn't your type," I clarified, the words hanging in the air between us. "How long have you known I wasn't the man you wanted?" Her mouth opened slightly, then snapped shut. She knew there was no good answer, no way to minimize the damage. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. "It's not that simple, Jake." I actually laughed then. A real laugh, tinged with bitterness, because of course, that's what she'd say. No, Olivia, I said, shaking my head slowly, the amusement fading, it actually is that simple. Tears welled up in her eyes, reflecting the overhead light, her fingers clutching the envelope so tightly that the edges started to wrinkle and bend. I didn't. I cut her off before she could utter another meaningless excuse. I gave you everything, Olivia, I said, my voice unwavering despite the turmoil churning inside me. I loved you. I built a life around you. I thought I was making you happy, and the entire time you were looking at me like I was a safety net, a backup plan, someone to fall back on when things got tough. She let out a soft sob, a pathetic, hollow sound, but I didn't stop. I wouldn't allow myself to feel sympathy. You told me you needed more, I continued, watching her slowly unravel in front of me. Well, congratulations. You got it. Now you get to go find whatever thrill, whatever excitement you've been chasing without me weighing you down. She shook her head, tears falling freely now, streaming down her face. Jake, please? I made a mistake, but we can fix this. I can fix this. No, Olivia, I corrected, my voice hard, unyielding. You made a choice. And now you have to live with the consequences of that choice. She wiped at her face, smearing the mascara, the effect almost comical. I don't know why I did it, she breathed, the words barely audible. It was the final break, the end of whatever flimsy connection I thought we still had. Her saying that, it wasn't about ruining anything for me, it just clarified something. You just proved that I deserve better, I stated matter-of-factly. She choked back a sob, her hand flying up to cover her mouth as if to physically contain her emotions. I felt nothing, or maybe relief. I grabbed my keys from the kitchen counter, the metal cool against my palm, and headed for the front door. I paused on the threshold, turned back to face her one last time. You wanted excitement, I said, my voice strangely calm, devoid of any emotion. Fine. Go find it. And with that I walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. The sound of her muffled crying, seeping through the thick wood, was more satisfying than any therapist's platitudes could have been. In the aftermath, amidst the swirling chaos, I tried to refocus my energy on myself. Meanwhile, she did exactly what I anticipated, constructed a performance of effortless happiness. Her social media became a meticulously curated stage. Picture after picture appeared, nights out in fancy places, elaborate cocktails, forced smiles, the kind of performative joy people broadcast when they're desperately trying to convince the world, and maybe themselves, that everything is perfect. For a fleeting moment, I almost bought into it, almost allowed myself to believe she was genuinely thriving. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Through mutual friends, the truth trickled back to me. The guy she'd left me for? He ghosted her completely. No confrontation, no explanation, just a digital vanishing act. He stopped replying to her messages, unfollowed her across all platforms, simply disappeared. The thrill she had chased, the exciting novelty, had evaporated. Then came the job loss. She'd always skated by, I knew that. Half-hearted effort masked by charm and flimsy excuses. But eventually, even her charisma couldn't mask her lack of substance. The layoff, dressed up as downsizing or restructuring, was inevitable. Everyone knew she simply wasn't pulling her weight. And the friends, the ones she partied with, stuck around as long as the champagne flowed. But when the cash dried up, when she wasn't the fun one anymore, they drifted away, one by one. The people she had prioritized over me weren't there when she actually needed them. It's been 8 months since everything imploded. Honestly, life's been pretty damn good. I moved into a killer apartment downtown. Turns out when you're not subsidizing someone else's shopping addiction, you can actually afford to live well. Funny how that works, lol. I got back into rock climbing, something I'd neglected, and started seeing this amazing girl from my gym, Sarah. Gym girls are just different. She genuinely appreciates the small things we do together. Last week, we grabbed cheap tacos from a food truck and wandered around the city for hours, just talking. It was infinitely better than any of the fancy, forced dinners I ever had with my ex. And the best part? She makes her own money, pays her own bills. It's a wild concept, right? The funniest part of all? My ex tried to contact me last week. A simple, desperate text, "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at my phone, a dry laugh escaping my lips. I didn't even bother opening the message. Mutual friends informed me that she's been couch surfing after her boyfriend, the one she cheated with, unceremoniously kicked her out. Guess the grass wasn't greener on the other side after all. Looking back, my only real regret is wasting 8 years on someone who saw me as a walking ATM. But hey, sometimes you have to endure the bad to truly appreciate the good, right? Holy crap, this blew up. Thanks for all the awards and support, guys. And to everyone asking, Yes, Sarah knows the whole story, and no, I'm not giving my ex a second chance. LMAO.